Hey, welcome back to How to Barbecue Right. I'm Malcolm Reed. Y'all, I'm rib hungry today, so I picked me up a couple slabs of spare ribs from the grocery store. Now, I'm wanting a savory rib. We're leaving the sweet out of these today. I've got my country sausage seasoning out. I've used it on pork butt, but never on ribs. So today, we're gonna find out how this sausage seasoning does on some ribs and some hickory smoke. Let's get to cooking, y'all. So I picked up some big slabs of full spare ribs. Now, what a full spare rib is, it means it still has this part of the rib tips connected to it. Now, I am gonna cut these down to St. Louis cut ribs, but I saved some money by buying that whole spare rib, and when I cut it down, I got the tips that I like to eat. So to make St. Louis cut spare ribs, you want to pull back some of this flat meat, and we're going to trim some of this excess off. But what I'm looking for is where these bones kind of terminate on the rack of the ribs. And what we're going to do is we're going to kind of find that longest bone. Usually it's about the third or fourth bone. And then we're just going to make a straight cut right across the rack. It cuts right in between the cartilage on the tips of the ribs, and it leaves us all this beautiful rib tip. Now, don't throw that away. We're gonna season it up. We're gonna cook it right along these racks of ribs, and they're gonna be delicious too. There's just a lot of cartilage, a lot of sinew that we need to get off of them, clean them up just a little bit. So I usually take off a little bit of that tip edge, take off some of this flat meat. They're all even, the bones are running pretty straight. It's gonna be some good eating right here. Now, some people leave this membrane on the back, but I ain't gonna do that. I don't like to eat it. You could score it a little bit if you don't wanna get it off, but if you'll just grab a paper towel and kind of go right in underneath the bone, you can see how I'm kind of lifting it up here. This membrane will pull right off. The paper towel helps you get some grip on it. Once you get it started, all you do is pull right down the rack of ribs. Now we've removed that barrier that was on the back side. It lets us get seasoning on both sides of the ribs, and we won't have nothing tough to chew on when these ribs are done. Now for our rib tips, I'm just gonna clean up some of this thick fat that's on them. Just take your sharp knife, get right under that sinew. Some of it will just pull right off. That knife will help though. And it just gets it down to the meat where we can season it, get some smoke on it. Now look at all that good meat on these rib tips. You don't want to throw that away. When you cook it down, it's gonna be just like the rib meat. You've got a little bit of floater bones in there, some cartilage, but man, when it cooks down, it's just as good as this rack of ribs. Now I wanna add a little moisture to these ribs to help our seasoning stick. Now you could use any kind of binder you want. Today, I'm using a little apple cider vinegar mixed with a little apple juice just to dilute it down. I thought I had a spritz bottle here at the house, but I don't evidently. I don't know what happened to it. So I'm improvising. I've just got me a little water bottle. I even got a funnel to help me pour it in here. And I'm just gonna eyeball about half a bottle. Then we're gonna pour in some apple juice here just to balance out that vinegar so it's not so strong. Don't worry about the sugars in the apple juice. We're not going to use that much of it, so it's not going to cause our ribs to burn. We're going to put our water bottle lid back on, and I'm just going to take my knife and poke me a little hole in it. Improvised spritzer. I don't need a whole lot. I just want to dampen them up. Now we're ready for the seasoning. And I've got 1 cup of sausage seeds and 1 cup of turbinado sugar in here. The sugar is just gonna balance out some of that heat and some of those spices, and it's gonna help those ribs caramelize a little bit. It's not gonna make them sweet. They're still gonna be savory, but it's gonna balance out all the flavors in the sausage seasoning. I'm just gonna give them a good coat here. I can smell the pepper, smell a little bit of that sage. Now, it's not gonna taste like breakfast sausage, I promise y'all. It really brings out the flavor in the pork. And since I hit them with a little bit of that cider apple juice mixture, it's really sticking really well. So just give them a nice little pat here. Kind of help those seasonings stick to that meat. We don't want them to come off, but I want them to work on this meat for about an hour once I get both sides seasoned here. Let's flip them over, do the same thing to this top side. Get our little improvised spritzer back out. Actually, it works pretty good. When in barbecue, you gotta improvise. The dredge makes it come out really even. That looks good right there. Phew, man. Got a little pep in the step there with that sausage seasoning. I'll tell you what, that sausage seasoning looks pretty good on top of it. I like seeing the peppers. I know it's gonna crust up, give us some nice looking bark, but it's gonna taste even better. So today I'm cooking on my Outlaw stick burner pit. Got me a bed of hot coals over here. Gonna put some wood in it, get that smoke rolling. Wanted to hold this pit at 275 for the whole cook. So you can see I got some good lump charcoal burned down. We're just gonna stick one of these splits on. It's gonna start generating some smoke. It's gonna generate some BTUs. It's gonna hold this pit right where I want it. Our grill's ready. It's running about 275 degrees. So we're gonna lay these ribs on. I want that air and that heat and that smoke just to flow over them. So I'm putting them on across the grate here. And lay our other rack right here beside them. We're pretty close to the dial, so we're gonna be running true temps. They're gonna cook the way you lay them on here. I don't think I forgot about my rib tips. I got them seasoned up too. One of them's going up front, one of them's going on the side there. Pitmaster snacks. I want it to stay between 275 and 300 the whole cook. Just add a stick of wood on this pit about every 45 minutes. If you're cooking on any other pit, which you can, just keep it at 275 for the whole cook. So we've been on 1 hour. Hadn't even peeked at these ribs, but it's time to see if they need a little bit more of our cider apple juice spritz. Starting to look good. We're getting a little color on them. They're not dark or anything, but they're dried out. So we want to add just a little bit of moisture, moving a lot of air across them at 275 here. Still got some hickory smoke rolling. It's time to add another piece. So we still got a good hot bed of coals. There's one little split still giving off a little, but I'm gonna go ahead and start the next one right beside it. It's gonna hold us right at that 275 range where we want it. Get the door shut, keep on cooking. The 2 hour mark, check them out. We're starting to get some color now, starting to darken up. I'm gonna add a little bit more of our spritz, cider vinegar, apple juice. Color is looking good. 2.5 hours is about what I like. It's gonna render them down a little more. We're gonna add another stick on the fire. In 30 minutes, we're gonna wrap. All right, y'all, 2.5 hours, and we got some ribs that are ready to wrap. First, I'm gonna ease these tips off. Now look at them. You don't think that's good eating. Why would you throw a rib tip away? That is too much good meat that we got off these whole spares. Beautiful color already. I mean, that ain't nothing but that sausage seasoning, a little turbinado, little spritz. So let's get these ribs wrapped up. We don't want them to cool off. I'm gonna hit them with a little bit more of our little apple cider, apple juice mixture, just to give a little moisture. And then we're gonna flip them over. Do the same thing, give them a little bit more moisture on that side. Now, I don't normally do this, but today I wanted to put a probe in them and just see how it does. So I've got my little short probe, and I'm gonna go in right in these big bones. Make sure I go between the meat, right up in the middle. We're gonna watch the temperature on these ribs and just see how they do. So let's take our paper. You gotta tear it just a little bit to get it around that probe. We're gonna fold it up here, then we're gonna flip it, fold it over, and it's ready to go right back on the grill, meat side down, because it helps the bones keep from popping out. All that gravity and the pressure we're putting on them while they're wrapped up is pulling that meat apart from the bone. And if you cook them meat side down, they won't pop out the back as bad. On this thermometer, we're 166 degrees. That's about where I thought it would be after 2.5 hours. We got a ways to go, because y'all know we're shooting up 202 to 206. They're gonna be done somewhere in there. I set it at 204 so I can kind of feel on them. Put our tips back on, ribs back on. And we're gonna close the Outlaw pit, and we're gonna let it roll till that thermometer gets to 204. So it's been 1 hour, 20 minutes before my alarm went off. 204 in the thickest part of that slab of ribs where we put the probes. I know we are looking good. So I'm gonna go ahead and get these ribs off. We'll start with the big one. We got probed there. How's it feel? Is it bend? Look at that. If you can feel it, and it's flexing inside that paper, I know it's gonna be close. And I'm gonna take them over to the cutting board. I'm gonna let them hang out just a little bit. If you wanted to hold these for an hour or two, you could drop them down in the dry cooler. Today, I'm just gonna let them sit for about 20, 30 minutes. Then we're gonna cut into them, see how we did with that sausage seasoning. I don't know about y'all, but I wanna see one of these rib tips first. Oh man, I know they're tender. Check that out. Still got some juice on it. Rendered that bone back. So with the rib tips, usually you just cut them in about a 2-inch piece. Sometimes they fall apart, that's okay, but they're supposed to be tender if they're cooked right. We melted all that fat that was in there, all that collagen cooked down to give us flavor. And look at this, you can just take this meat off with your hand. Immediately. Hickory smoke, pork flavor. The sausage seasoning comes through, but it's subtle. It gives it a salty savoriness. There's no sweetness to these ribs. If you wanted to serve them with the sauce, hey, go ahead. But I want to taste that pork. That's what I like about this butcher paper. Picks up some of that moisture that comes out. Doesn't leave your ribs greasy. You don't end up with a lot of liquid to get rid of. But just look at how beautiful that rack of ribs is. It's got that color from that stick burner. Pretty mahogany look to it. You can see the herbs on it. Oh man, smell the hickory smoke. That's beautiful. This was the big slab. I mean, that dude right there, it's ready to break. I mean, it don't take much, but that is a rack of St. Louis ribs. Now, I'm just taking this knife. We're gonna cut us off some bones here. Now, y'all know I'm pulling me out one of these meaty ones. You can see that hickory smoke, back to the pork, back to the hickory smoke. We surrounded it in it. Let's see if it's tender when I bite it. Oh, juice just ran. That's a good rib. It's meaty. You get the smoke. You get a little of the sausage seasoning, mainly some of the heat, some of the pepper that's in it, the red pepper. Y'all, if you want to try a savory rib, you got to give these a shot. sausage seasoning with a little turbinado. Cut some whole spare ribs down into St. Louis cut. Get them in some hickory smoke for a couple hours. When they get that good bark on them, wrap them up in some butcher paper and let them get tender. It don't get no easier than that. And you got the rib tips to snack on when you're done. Hey, thanks for hanging out with us here at HowToBBQRight. If you like what we're doing, subscribe to our channel. Y'all know you can find us at HowToBBQRight on all the social platforms. Shell and I will talk about this rib recipe on our weekly podcast. Y'all check it out too. We'll see you next time. All right, Shell, you ready for one of these ribs? This might be one of your favorites because it's savory.